This is my 54 Panhead. This is an FLE model. The E models were traditionally used as police bikes. They've got a milder cam, which makes them a little bit easier to drive at slow speeds around town and parades and those kinds of things. I've had a number of folks asking me questions about the bike, things like, is it all 54, some parts different years, is it even aftermarket, what are you going to change? Are you going to do a full restoration? So I thought I'd kind of walk through the bike as it is now and give some of my thoughts on it. First of all, no, I'm not going to do a full restoration. This bike is going to be a regular rider. Over time, as I happen to come across original parts, I may swap some out. There are some that I intend to swap out immediately, but I don't have the goal of stripping off all the aftermarket parts, stripping off all of the wrong year parts and replacing them with genuine 54 parts. Again, if the opportunity arises, I won't shy away from it, but that's not really my goal. Now, there are some parts on here that are like from 55 that I do want to swap, and I'll kind of go over that as I cover the different parts of the bike. So first of all, this is a straight leg frame. You can kind of tell that here. You see how the frame members go all the way up, straight up and down. Prior to 54, they all had wishbone frames, which came down kind of this little dog leg around and such. Midway through 54, they switched to this straight leg frame. And I'm told there were only 200 straight leg frames in 54. I don't know if that's true or if there were only 200 FLE straight leg frames or 200 straight leg frames overall that year. But I like it. I'll do some more research and find out how many or see if anybody knows. But this is a straight leg frame. For those that don't know, it's a Panhead because the heads on the engine here, these bits, they kind of look like, well, they look like pans. They look like old, almost like the kind of pans you might use in a mess kit, you know. So I'll talk about the things that I know are not quite right for this year and which ones I care about and which ones don't. First of all, let's talk about the seat. I love tractor seats, solo seats. I used to have a 66 Shovelhead that had a seat like this, and they're so comfortable. But this one is from 55 and up. The 1954 seat was slightly different. There are some conchos and it had a rolled seam and stuff like that. They're really hard to find in good shape now, and since this is going to be a regular rider, I'll stick with what I've got. It looks fine to me. You can get aftermarket reproductions of the 54 seat. They're made in Taiwan, and I don't know what the quality of them is, so this one's perfectly fine. If somehow I stumble across a great condition 54 seat in reasonable price, maybe, but I don't have really a goal for that. What's missing here there are a couple additional springs and a catch. Oop, kind of lost the focus there. And a catch that would screw into these three holes here, if you can see them. And that spring sits here. And on the buddy seat, which is a slightly longer seat for a passenger, they provide extra support. You can put those on and hook them to the back of this seat with the right adapters, the right clips. So I might do that as well. If nothing else, I'll probably put it on just so if I ever do get a buddy seat, it'll be ready to go. The logo on the side of the tank is correct for the year, but I think it's probably a reproduction. I don't think it's an original. It's in such great shape. I suspect it's probably a reproduction aftermarket part. The horn, the air cleaner are both right for this year. Of course, there's the motor. The front fender, I suspect is probably a 55, but I don't know. One big thing it is missing is the medallion. All 1954 bikes had a medallion right here because it was the 50th anniversary. And so right where my pointer is, there should be a kind of a brass looking medallion that says Harley 50th, etc. Reproduction ones are cheap. They're, 30 bucks. Real ones are upward of 600. So I don't know if I'll put a real one on or not. We'll see. The spokes and the wheels have been powder coated. That's not original. The headlights and the spots, I think, are correct. Police bikes usually would have these in alternating colors, or red actually, I think. But everything else I think is correct for these. The trim here this is a Hydroglide, by the way. It's called Hydroglide because this was the front forks are hydraulic forks. Prior to that, they had springers. The Hydroglide tin here, these chevrons go diagonal. That was a 55 and up thing. In 54, they were horizontal. Again, that's not something I terribly care about. It would be an easy swap if I came across one for the right price, but you know, who cares? Gas tank. First of all, this is a hand shift foot clutch bike. Now, some people are going to call this a suicide shift. That's wrong. First of all, there's no such thing as a suicide shift. It's a jockey shift and a suicide clutch, but this has neither. This is a true rocker clutch, so that right now you can see this would be clutch engaged, and that would be, so you'd be in neutral. So that's the difference. On a suicide clutch, you would have to hold it down in place with your foot, so if your foot slipped off, all of a sudden you're in gear and catapulting into traffic. And a jockey shift would be back here on the transmission. The big difference, other than having to reach back like a jockey's flogging a horse and changing the gears, is that with the ratchet transmission, there's two different kinds of transmissions. This kind, when you shift up or down, it stays in the position you left it in. With I think it's the ratchet is what it's called. Maybe it's the jockey transmission. I forget what it's called. But the other kind that you use with jockey shift, you tap it up to shift a gear, and you let go, and it snaps right back to that center position. So you kind of got to remember how many up and how many down. This, it's gated, so not only is the transmission staying in position, but you can see the gears. Get the focus to work here. First and fourth gear here. First neutral, 2, 3, 4. Some other things that are a little bit unusual if you're used to modern bikes is that's the front brake. You'll notice it's on the left hand instead of the right. There's nothing on the right. Right hand is the throttle. One thing you may notice about the throttle as compared to modern bikes, if I can get a focus here, is when you turn it, it stays right where you left it. It doesn't snap back. The left side is the advance and retard of the ignition. So you can see down here, if I can get this to turn, there is come on camera. As I move that lever, the grip, it advances and retards the ignition time, which makes it much easier to kickstart. The speedometer is, I don't think it's a reproduction, but it's certainly not the right year. The 1954 speedometer had a red indicator in white letters, and I think it might have said Harley-Davidson here as well. But again, looks good to me. That's something that I'm not going to spend a lot of time and effort trying to track down. The fuel tap is aftermarket. The gas caps, I think, should be taller if they're the Enco ones. Again, if I stumble across something, maybe I'll pick them up. That's an easy swap. Coil is the wrong type. Works great, aftermarket, not a true original 54 coil. Again, I prefer reliability for this because I'm going to be riding it. So, I'm not too worried. One thing I don't like is the voltage regulator would normally be mounted off the coil. Instead, come over here, this is the toolbox, and somebody has routed the wires for it and mounted the voltage regulator inside the toolbox, which doesn't hurt anything except that you don't have any room for tools. So that's something I may correct. Let's talk about the rear fender. So 54, 55, both had the same front section for the rear fender. You'll notice there is a indentation for the chain guard. Oopsie, there we go. Indentation for the chain guard, and a cutout here. Now, prior years, I think 49 is when they stopped doing it. There used to be an extra plate here to guard against the chain. Like, they quit doing that. So this is, I think, correct with the one rib for 54. But the flip, the hinge section of the tailpiece that comes up, is wrong for this year. It should have a tombstone tail light here, not this oval one. And unfortunately, you can't just swap the tail lights because this is actually cut out for this size and shape of tail light. So what I'm planning on doing, well, tentatively planning on doing, is getting the correct year flip, getting it painted to match, and attaching it here. I think this is an original Fender though, and I hesitate to just swap it out. You'll notice that the hinge has 3 loops that are one size and 2 that are the other, and that matches what I've read about for the stock Fenders. So I don't know if I want to spend the money for a whole new Fender, especially since I'll have to get it painted. But if I could drive out the pin, swap out the back, just the flip section, that's significantly cheaper than buying a whole new Fender. And I really love the look of those tombstone taillights, so I have a reason to want to do that. Let's see, what else? I think the transmission, the primary cover is the right style, but wrong. It's aftermarket. I don't think it's original. Again, nah, I don't care. One thing you can see is original. It leaks oil. That's pretty normal for these. There's a tube that comes off of the breather that would normally be, if you were driving it, would blow on your chain. Right now it's dripping a little bit. So anytime you see an old bike like this, old Harley specifically, you're gonna find, I bet you Indians probably do it too, you're gonna find a certain amount of oil leakage, which is perfectly fine. This Fender mudguard, I'm told, was an optional accessory available in 54. It certainly shows up in the encyclopedia that I've got for 54 parts. The exhaust is the right style, but I don't think they had I didn't see a fishtail like that for 54, and it's certainly aftermarket. Love the look of it. I'm gonna keep it as it is. It sounds great. The Kickstarter is aftermarket. The oil tank, the oil bag, this is a more modern style. The chrome wraparound one, it's certainly aftermarket, but there is a certain concession to reliability that I like. The oil tank has a dipstick lid instead of just a screw-on type, which we'd have in 54. I like having the dipstick. Again, most of this goes to practicality of going to ride this thing regularly and not trying to be a museum piece. So there it is. Happy to answer more questions about it if anybody has any. But I really like the bike. I'm just waiting to fire it up. I don't have gas in it right now, mostly because it's been like anywhere from 10 to 20 degrees and there's been snow and ice on the ground, and I don't really want to take my first ride on it and just dump it because I was dumb enough to ride it on ice. So I'm just kind of waiting for the weather to warm up a little bit, and we'll take her out for a spin. Anyway, there it is. Please feel free to contact me and ask any questions or whatever. I probably won't know the answers, but I'll be able to get them. It's a beautiful bike. I actually traveled all the way to Pennsylvania to find it and pick it up and have it shipped here. I did a lot of research about what I was looking for. I wanted the 54 year, and FLE is what I was looking for. I would have settled for a FL, but this is exactly what I wanted, and great looking bike.